companies that realize that it's going to be a short-lived correction are going to use that as an opportunity, because that is typically what happens during these times where corrections happen. Companies that have the foresight and know, hey, this is going to be a 6 to 12 month downturn, but I'm going to capitalize on it, make the right investments to build the right infrastructure to capitalize on whatever comes next. I think those are the ones that are going to thrive.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Recent economic events have taught us that supply chain is much deeper than most people think. These events, regardless of whether macro or microeconomic, have potential to throw off the supply chain planning. And it requires careful calibration and cross-functional collaboration. So the supply chain professionals have data they need to take preventive measures to ensure that you are prepared for supply chain disruptions before it's too late. In today's episode, our guest, Michael Van Keulen, also known as MVK, shares his insights on the current supply chain trends and opportunities. He also discusses the procurement maturity model for companies at various stages and what companies that are successful with their procurement and supply chain do differently. Finally, he discusses macroeconomic trends and their impact on the supply chain planning for the companies in the short term and long term. Let me introduce MVK to you. MVK is a passionate and seasoned procurement evangelist with a comprehensive track record of driving value through business transformation at global companies. MVK is currently the Chief Procurement Officer at Coupa Software, the global leader in cloud-based business spend management software, where he is responsible for driving best-in-class procurement practices across the company, support business development, and be a source for peers looking to elevate and digitally transform procurement. With that, let's get to the conversation. Michael, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Super excited to have you because the kind of environment that we have as of today for supply chain procurement, it's changing on a daily basis. So it's going to be so much fun discussing that. Before we do that, do you want to start with a quick intro about yourself and what is your current focus, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, a pleasure to be here, Sam. My name is Michael Van Keulen, or some of your listeners will know me as MVK. I am currently the Chief Procurement Officer at Coupa Software, and I'm proud to be the CPO here at the leading business spend management company in the world. I've been in procurement and supply chain for over 20 years now. I've led procurement transformation and digitized the procurement process twice. And I'd say, this is the third time that I've picked Coupa in my career, and this time also as my employer of choice.
Okay, very cool. So obviously we are going to have fun discussing all of those current supply chain issues that we have. But we have one more standard question that we ask every single guest that come on the show, and that is going to be, Michael, your perspective on business growth.
My perspective on business growth. Well, I genuinely believe that in order for your business to thrive, you're going to have really great cross-functional support and alignment between the various functions. And what I mean with that is you obviously need a great product, a great service, something that sets you apart, some unique selling points. But I legitimately believe that you're going to have really great cross-functional alignment between your supply chain, your finance organization, your treasury, your IT, your business, and procurement in order to fully capitalize on the opportunity that you have. So, without great governance, compliance, control, you're never going to optimize the business spend that you have in order to fuel your growth. You also need to have great innovation. You can drive a lot of innovation through your supply chain, and we'll get to that topic in a second. But I legitimately believe in the best businesses in the world have the ability to break down the silos between those functional areas and truly create a cross-functional collaborative model that drives better business outcomes and ultimately fuels your growth. And I've seen this many times in my career.
Amazing perspective there. And I completely agree with your assessment that the cross-functional nature is probably going to drive the growth. And you are absolutely right. But in my experience, when I look at the supply chain, right now, I think people are realizing based on the current trends that, okay, supply chain is far deeper than they used to think. For them, supply chain was always, somewhere in the corner, just doing a bunch of planning and that's it done, right? But now people are realizing that no, it's really deep, it's very cross-functional. So let's talk about some of the current issues that we are experiencing in the market at this point of time. Michael, what do you think is driving these supply chain issues? Do you want to touch briefly on those?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think at first it's important to understand that the supply chain disruption that we're seeing today are truly being compounded by the many historical events that have been happening. Now, we talk about COVID. Obviously, that's a natural one that everybody gravitates towards. But there's been other historic events that have happened over the past 24 months. I mean, we've seen natural disasters with climate. We've seen droughts. We've seen forest fires. We've seen hurricanes and things of that nature. Weather patterns are changing. But we've also seen the Suez Canal that created significant disruption and has really led to significant changes in the way we ocean freight things these days. I mean, there's been still aftermath of that. Of course, what's happening in the Ukraine and the tragedies that are happening with war. But we've also seen trade disruption. We've seen China with the US and with, across the world. So my point is, there's been lots of disruption. And yes, COVID has been one of the ones as well. But so I think it's important we realize that. I think the second thing we need to realize is that the supply chains that we've built over the past 50 years after, let's say, the Second World War, and has been continued over the past 30, 50 years, whatever, pick a number, has always been focused on taking out cost. We've consistently been focused on efficiency in our supply chain, and efficiency typically was calculated by cost per unit. And so what has happened is we've come really far with efficiency, but we have not really been focused on resilience and agility. And I think where procurement has the opportunity to stand up and lead, especially in a market today that's uncertain, unprecedented, high inflation, massively disrupted, is that we provide our businesses with optionality. And I think for the longest time, that was less relevant. It was mostly around cost and what you just said. We were stuck in the dungeon and we just made sure business continuity was a guarantee, almost like was a given. Now that has changed. And so procurement and supply chain have that ability to drive optionality, to build agility, to build resilience in their supply chain. And particularly in a hyperinflationary market that we're in today, spend visibility and control are absolutely paramount. And what we're seeing is, especially across the globe, there's still a lot of companies that are struggling with having that end-to-end spend visibility. It's still a very siloed approach, upstream with sourcing, downstream with finance, in the middle with procurement, and then at the back end, you got the treasurer, and around that, you got the business. And so companies that have not really built and started to think about agility and resilience in a better way, they are going to struggle, and they will continue to struggle, and they will continue to be reacting to what's going on, which typically means you're too late, rather than being proactive and really looking at what alternatives are out there and the what if scenarios. And I've seen firsthand what it can do to a business in a positive way. I mean, in my past, we've done a lot of that. But I also know there's a lot of companies that are still struggling and figuring it out.
Yeah, so some very interesting commentary there. And I really like the way you have put it overall, planning the reactive versus proactive. And in today's supply chain, obviously, you need to be a lot more proactive if you want to be prepared, because at this point of time, I think the costs are changing on a minute basis. So I don't know how any company can really plan and what companies are doing at this point of time. So I don't know if you're going to have any specific story that you might be able to pick in terms of what they might be able to do. So one of the comment that you mentioned that, okay, you should be doing a lot more what if analysis. So if I do what if analysis, that is going to be as of this moment. Okay, it's going to be really hard to predict what is going to happen in next 4 months, because we were thinking, if you think about, previous 4 months, we were thinking, okay, maybe COVID is going to be gone in 2022, but it's still here, right? And then we have far more problems now in 2022. So how do you sort of plan for this in your experience? Let's say you are thinking more.
Yeah, I mean, of course, nobody can predict the future, because if we can, I wouldn't do what I do today.
Exactly.
But what you can do is you can create what if scenarios by, for example, creating a digital twin of your supply chain. So what we have is we have customers that use Coupa's supply chain design and optimization platform to create a digital twin of your supply chain. And what that does is it allows you to run a whole slew of scenarios based upon whatever constraints you have, based upon whatever scenario you're planning. And then you'll let the technology based upon your supply chain, your digital twin, calculate and provide you with a set of outcomes based on data. So data-driven solutions, data-driven scenarios. So think about it as Madhav, who is one of our supply chain gurus at Coupa. He talks about it as a pilot in a simulator. The first time that you fly a 787 is not going to be when you literally get on a plane and fly a 787. No, you've done thousands of hours in a flight simulator. So think of it as that. When you build your supply chain, you cannot possibly predict the future. Nobody knows if COVID, I mean, knock on wood, comes back in the fall. Who knows? Or if it's not COVID, it could be recession. It could be, what if the inflation rate goes to 25%? What if the cost of capital goes up even higher? I mean, right now, I think we're at like 5% or so in the Western world. What if that goes to 20? What if, the Federal Reserve in the US makes certain decisions to tighten monetary policies further? And, what if the job market goes, what if unemployment becomes 10% and you are in a retail environment? Then what? So my point is, what a lot of companies do that are using our technology is they create a digital twin of their supply chain, and they run all these scenarios, and then they make fact-based decisions. And that's ultimately what you have to do.
Amazing scenarios there. And obviously, it's going to be a lot of uncertainty, even in the next coming months, as we are thinking about the current issues. I mean, I don't think issues are going to be done anytime soon. And let's say if I'm thinking more from the business owner perspective, some of these issues could be really extreme, because we don't know how this is all going to shape up, right? So, and, let's say if I'm thinking this more from the business owner perspective, then I don't know if I can plan for all of those. So let's say, Michael, let's say if you had some sort of realistic, okay, these are the issues that you are definitely seeing in the next 4 months. Since, you provided an example of 787, that, okay, if you fly 1,000 runs, then you probably know and you can forecast, okay, what problems you are probably going to get in the next flight, right? So based on your experience, let's say you were to forecast something, what is going to happen in next 4 months overall from the macroeconomic issues? What would be the factors that you would be most worried?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that what should have happened during COVID. I'm not an economist, but I can give you my transparent and candid opinion of what I think is going on.
Yeah.
What I think should have happened, and it's easy to say this in the rearview mirror, but I think what we were trying to do is to get through COVID without it really impacting the real economy. And as a result of that, what governments have done is, free money, continue to print money, if you will, to try to mitigate the economic implications of COVID. That's, of course, a temporary solution. And I think it's without a doubt that we are going to see some sort of recession in the next 6 to 12 months. Typically, the stock market is always 6 to 12 months ahead of the real economy. Of course, we've seen, over the past, 3 months or so, some significant correction in the stock market. We're seeing inflation rates going up in double digit. We're seeing raw material prices going up significantly. But we're also seeing that a lot of large retailers are announcing during their earnings release that their inventory levels are starting to get higher. So that means that to me that demand is starting to taper off. So typically what happens is, I'm an old school economist. If demand starts to come down, rate of inflation is really, really high. Interest rates need to go up. That, of course, is not going to help the housing market. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? The cost of capital continues to go up. I see that interest rates in some developed countries are going up by a factor of 3 or 4 over the past 6 months. So now affordability becomes an issue. So anyway, long story short, I think we are due for a recession. I think it'll be short. I don't think it'll be long. I don't think it's going to be 3 years. I think it'll be 6 to 12 months of some downturn. And I think that companies that realize that it's going to be a short-lived correction are going to use that as an opportunity, because that is typically what happens during these times where corrections happen. Companies that have the foresight and know, hey, this is going to be a 6 to 12 month downturn, but I'm going to capitalize on it, make the right investments to build the right infrastructure to capitalize on whatever comes next. I think those are the ones that are going to thrive. But there's no doubt in my mind that the next 6 to 12 months are going to see some pain.
Yeah, so very interesting. And this is where the flight experience is going to be really handy. So, when we had last 2 recessions, so I think you were a practitioner back then as the procurement person. So I don't know, how you prepared, let's say in last 2 recessions. Do you have any insights for the business owners? So let's say whatever you have done for the last 2, can they do similar things for this recession as they might be preparing for those? So what are some of the things that you will take care of?
I think you need to start to think about your lead times.
Okay.
First and foremost. That's the first thing I do. Look at the lead times. When do I need to place my purchase orders? When do I need to buy stuff for it to land? And based on what volume am I going to buy? And then align with the business that I may want to be more conservative, which may mean that if the demand continues to keep up, I may have to, incur additional costs to get stuff to wherever it is that I need it to get to faster, because then you're just going to have to pay for it. But it's better than the alternative of sitting on a bunch of inventory, because during downtimes, we all know cash is king.
Yep.
And so preserving cash is going to be extremely important. And so what we used to do was look at demand, take a more conservative approach, and start to think about preserving cash during times of, where things are going to be tough. Because if you're going to be reliant on a lender during difficult times, you're going to very quickly get into trouble. You're already seeing it with some of these, Series C, Series B companies that were out there. A lot of them are no longer with us, unfortunately, because they were so reliant on PE funding, which, has been drying up at a very fast pace. So my point is, preserve cash is really critical in a time of uncertainty. I think you need to take a more conservative approach to your demand, maybe relook at lead time. But more importantly, talk to your suppliers, right? Talk to your suppliers. Your suppliers are having the same challenges as you have as your business of uncertainty. So maybe together with your suppliers, because that is one thing that I think has come out of COVID had the past 2 years with the disruption in supply chain, is that the realization you need to have a much closer partnership with your suppliers. So work with your suppliers. Go talk to them. Hey, what is happening in your world? What are you seeing? What are you seeing with your customers and maybe the suppliers' customers that you're working with? So really open yourself up and not consider this like a four-wall kind of conversation. But I would encourage all these companies across the globe to collaborate together. And I think if we do that, then I think we will overcome whatever lies next. I believe it. Does that make sense, Sam? I'm also testing my logic.
It definitely does. I mean, this is what I would personally do, to be honest, okay, if I were the practitioner. And by the way, on that note, I think, there's going to be a little bit of short-term and long-term perspective. And if you look at, things such as your system, and that is always the tricky subject to discuss when you are going to have such uncertain environment. And then you talk a lot about the procurement. So obviously you need to do these things in short term that you just mentioned, that you need to figure out your supply chain. But let's say if you don't have enough visibility in your supply chain, okay, what do? Do you implement your system first, or do you try to understand your supply chain first? So do you want to touch a little bit more there in terms of how you
absolutely. I mean, if there's one thing that I've had that I'm passionate about, I mean, there's a few things professionally. I mean, it is procurement maturity. And I've been fortunate enough in my career together with a group. Yeah, it's never me, but it's, I always, when I say I always talk about it in a, it is always a team sport, and it's definitely multiple people that have been supportive. But procurement maturity is something I'm passionate about, and I've had the pleasure and the benefit of doing that a few times in my career. What you often see is, in my brain, there are 4 levels of procurement maturity. Level 1 is, very tactical, very operational in nature. It's very reactive, rear view mirror kind of procurement, right? You're dealing with invoices and you don't really have great spend visibility. Then the second stage of procurement maturity is what we call sourcing mastery. So now you start to run some sourcing events and you do some RFPs, and you kind of understand requirements, and you go into market and you drive some competitiveness. Then level 3 is, category strategy. So you do demand management and category management and write category plans and go much deeper, and you start to understand tier 2, tier 3 supply chain and things of that nature. You're starting to blend in ESG and strategies around diversity and D&I and those types of things into your sourcing strategies to really support your organization's goals. And then stage 4 is innovation. The biggest innovation you can drive is through the power of your supply chain. So those are the 4 levels. But it always comes down to people, process, and technology.
Yeah.
It sounds very basic, and we have a really good ebook, and I'm happy to share with your listeners if they want it. We built an ebook that talks about people, process, technology with 4 stages of procurement maturity. Very simple, and any executive can understand it, because often what we struggle with in procurement is to articulate to our executive team, what is procurement and why do we matter? Why should they care about us? Now it's easy. But even, trust me, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, when all of this is behind us, it'll happen at some point in the near future. I hope. I'm a positive thinker. People are going to forget about procurement again. And in order for us to stay relevant, we have to continue to be focused on procurement maturity. And it's always those 3 things. And best in class companies, yes, they have, digitized their business spend management process with solutions like Coupa. I don't want to turn this into too much of a sales pitch. But the other 2 elements are people and process. And you also need to have the right people. You need to have the right mechanics, if you will, right? To make sure the car is optimized. But you also need to have the right operating model and the right process. When does procurement get involved? That's not at the point where a contract has been negotiated with a supplier and here's procurement, here's the contract, get me a better deal. That's not procurement maturity, right? And so my point is, it needs to be all those 3 elements, and we can talk about this for hours. But that's how I think about it.
So very interesting. So obviously, one of the layers here is always going to be, okay, when do you start maturing your? So when you are looking at procurement maturity for enterprises could mean very different thing than SMB who might be struggling for cash at this point. So do you have any sort of insights in terms of how you will overlay this procurement maturity based on the inflection point? I don't know, if you're going to have things like, okay, 50, 100, $250 million, $1 billion. So when do you start thinking about all of these spaces that, okay, when you are $100 million, you better get, some sort of maturity around procurement. So how do you approach this?
Yeah. Like I don't really think about size of business. I'm a finance guy by education. Yep. That's my background. I think that the mistake that a lot of companies make is they invest a lot of time and energy in finance, accounts payable, paying your invoices, booking your invoices in your general ledger, closing the books every month, forecasting your spend, managing your inventory. I mean, companies spend quite some resource in what I call downstream business spend management, or procure to pay, right? Treasury. Most companies have a finance function. If you fully digitize your business spend management process, you don't need a ton of people in finance. Like a company that is $100 million in sales will very likely have at least 4 or 5 people in finance. What if you only need 2 people and the other 3 are managing your spending, right? Which is what procurement does, business spend management. And what if you let that downstream be automated and digitized by the power of technology? You no longer have to deal with administrative nonsense, right? Because some companies then automate it by implementing OCR, right? They implement some OCR engine and they have documents be digitally approved through some kind of scanning engine. Trust me, I've been there. But that is still automating a flawed process, because approving an invoice is kind of after the fact nonsense, right? It adds no value. What you want is the point of purchase. To me, it makes so much sense. You have to think like this, yeah? The point of purchase is what you want to approve. That should have governance, not the point of invoice. Because now you're reacting and you might say, hey, why did we buy this in the first place? Is the price correct? No, you can digitize that whole downstream process. We have customers that have 90+%, and these are customers like Procter and Gamble, yeah? So these are not small companies. 90+% of their invoice is fully digitized, fully electronic, touchless. That's where you want to go as a business. Whether you're 10 billion in sales, 5 billion, or 5 million, that maybe does not need a procurement function. But you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really matter. It's simplification of processes that add no value, and then you can redeploy those resources into value activities that do add to your top line and to your bottom line. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, to be honest. And I completely agree that, just cutting the invoices, what's the point of doing all of that? Systems can do, those are the resources that you can really deploy in your customer experience, because the more customer facing, that's where they are going to add real value. So I completely agree with your assessment there. So now we are going to add one more layer there, overall from the industry perspective. So do you see any specific trend overall when you analyze the procurement maturity, when you look at industry 1 versus industry 2, or some of the industries, do they need a lot more procurement maturity than the other? Do you see any specific trend based on the industries?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting conversation, and I might start to insult certain industries, so I need to be mindful. But we have, within Coupa, I should say, because I know the customers that we have well over 3,000 customers.
Yeah.
We have 7 million suppliers plus, and we manage more than $3 trillion worth of spend through our platform. We have customers that are really large, like BMW, Procter and Gamble, and the likes. We have a really long list by now, and Amazon and others. We also have mid-market, what we call mid-market, and then we have corporate accounts. There's no industry that is very specific. We've got financials, we've got insurance, we've got retail. We're very, very successful in retail. We've got lots of really great retail customers out there. I think most large retailers are Coupa customers or in the process of deploying us. So it's not like we don't. What I do see is that more like I'm going to call them old school, highly Six Sigma, over-engineered industries. They have the tendency to think that they are best in class.
Yeah.
And we have some examples. I don't have to mention them, but the black belts, the Six Sigmas. I do believe there is, of course, lots of value there that these companies bring to the table. But I think those are the ones that maybe still have some way to go when it comes to getting to 2022. And some have, but there's quite a few out there that I think still need to make that shift. And if they're not careful, they're gonna really suffer. The auto industry is a great example of an industry that is feeling the pain of we don't have to dwell on what's going on in the auto industry today, but and the cost of having run that supply chain too lean, too much focused on cost, and actually forgot to think about things like agility, resilience, and maybe some technology enablement.
So let's say if I give you a task of re-architecting the supply chain for auto industry, okay, what would you change in that?
I think Toyota is an example of a company that knew it, right? And that's why Toyota, every car industry in the world is being impacted. Our car brand has been impacted by, of course, the chip shortages. But Toyota, not to call out as, and they're not I don't think they're a Coupa customer, so there's no vested interest here for me. I don't think, I stand to be corrected, but they actually have been able to overcome the shortages much better than some of the other car brands. And the reason why is because they had much closer and better partnerships with their suppliers. And there's some other car brands out there that have done a better job than others, but I do know for sure that Toyota realized it. And so that's an example. So how would I redesign that supply chain? And I'm not smart enough to know because I don't want to get too cocky here, but I would much more focus on building agility in your supply chain, optionality, knowing the trade-offs, not just single source things, not go to, because that was the path, right, for a lot of companies, even the ones that I used to work for. Yeah, it was often this, and of course, what procurement brought to the table said, guys, what if, shopping bags at Lululemon is a great example. When I came in, it was single sourced. I know the story is kind of out there, maybe a little bit more now, but it was single sourced. One factory in Cambodia made all Lululemon shopping bags. It's the single biggest marketing collateral that the company has. So but nobody thought like that, and that's okay. It's my job. Yeah, there was no judgment. But anyway, I'm dwelling. But so that's what I would do: redesigning your supply chain, build agility.
Okay, so I am going to add one more layer there. Would you be worried about any specific categories, in any specific industries? Are you worried about any specific categories of supply chain that are going to experience far more problems in next 4 to 6 months?
Well, I think anything that you need to put on a container is still at a lot of risk, right? I mean, the cost is high, and there's lots of shortages in containers. I think it's going to taper off. I think economy is going to rectify that, and I think demand is coming down, and I hope that gives that industry time to maybe rejuvenate itself a little bit. I think the second one is, if you're heavily reliant on oil, I think you're going to suffer a lot. Right now the oil prices are high. Demand has not really come down. So if I'm a supplier in that in that area, there's really no incentive for me to lower prices, right? I mean, the demand is there. So, it's not like oil has gone to $110 and the demand came down. Like we didn't really see that. The demand has actually continued to stay very, very healthy. So if I'm now in that business, I mean, so I think those are probably two areas that if you're heavily reliant on oil, tier one or tier two, yeah, like if some of the stuff you buy is heavily contingent upon oil, like plastics or things of that nature, I think you're gonna still be feeling some pain over the next 4 to 6 months. I think then it'll taper off, because I think if economies are going into the direction that I think it is, we'll probably see some softening happening soon as well. So I don't know if that's where you were going with it, but.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's very insightful, and I think that's going to be extremely useful as well. So one more thing that I wanted to cover is going to be, there's a lot of innovation happening in the procurement space at this point of time. If you look at the number of technologies and the number of areas that are being developed, it's just mind-blowing to me. Okay, so in your experience, what are you going to be most excited about? Let's say if you talk about any specific technologies or the capabilities, developed based on the technologies. So what are you most excited about, let's say in next 3-4 years?
I think, one thing that I'm excited about, and to see where we're going to take it, is the power of community.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing that we talk about at Coupa a lot, is that concept that, none of us is as smart as all of us. And that if together we work together, and we share best practices, and we together try to problem solve common business challenges, that we will be stronger, and that we will be more profitable, and we will create more value for our stakeholders. And so we call that the power of community, or community.ai. I think we're only at scratching the surface. So if you think about like what we could potentially do for category management across our community of the 3,000 plus customers and 7 million suppliers and $3 trillion plus, let's think about it as the power of Google Maps, where it is the power of AI and the power of a lot of data to tell you how to get the fastest from point A to B to C to D and back to A, based upon what it picks up from other people that are using the same app. That's how I think about the power of community. So I'm excited to see where community goes, and extracting more value for our customers in our community through the power of that data set. That's one thing I'm really excited about. I think the other thing that I'm excited about is all the things that are happening around ESG and diversity. Build resiliency and diversity, include, like, that is, to me, goes hand in hand. So I'm excited to see where that goes as a practitioner. Where does ESG go? With all the legislation that is coming in Germany, in the UK, modern slavery, corruption, bribery, like, I think those things are only becoming more and more important. And I think it allows procurement that opportunity to remain relevant and to get that seat at the table and stay there, is if we can demonstrate that we can actually help execute and accelerate some of these objectives. So I'm excited about ESG, diversity, and how technology can help with achieving and exceeding our objectives. I mean, if there's one thing that we know for sure, climate change is real. We all have to step up and lead. And I think Coupa has an excellent opportunity here to lead some of that conversation. And we've got some of the biggest companies in the world as customers to together do that. And then the last thing that I might say is, recessions are of course not great, but if there's one thing that we have proven ourselves is that we will always come out stronger. Look at history, we've always come out stronger. And it's an excellent opportunity for companies to fully embrace the digitization of the business spend management process, and to see where that's going to take us technology-wise. I think that's exciting as well.
Love it. And I love the way Coupa is also thinking about community, because obviously other companies are thinking about community-based business models as well. Salesforce is big on that. So I am really excited to see what Coupa is going to do from the community perspective. On that note, do you have any last minute closing advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I always want to take this as an opportunity, one, to say there has never been a better time to be in procurement. Historically, we have never been more relevant. We've never been more important. We've never had a bigger seat at the table, and we've never had more attention than we have today. Take this as an opportunity to not waste the crisis, because we are in a crisis. Politically, economically, financially, environmentally, to capitalize. Don't waste the crisis. I think it's our time. It's been our time for a while, but it certainly is our time now. So if you're in procurement today, I highly encourage your listeners to step up and lead. Now is the time. Embrace technology. Think about your people. Build diverse teams. And think about your process. And think about your elevator pitch in procurement. Talk to your CEO. Ask for some investment. Don't be shy. And let's do it. I mean, this is the best time to be in procurement, and I'm very fortunate to be to play a role in it.
Could not agree more. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be that procurement and supply chain is where the money is. So now you have the seat. Make sure you are going to stay and remain relevant. Because obviously companies can make a lot of money if they do the procurement and supply chain.
Absolutely.
Right. On that
Amen.
note, that's it for today. I really want to thank you for your time and insights.
Yeah, no, thank you for your time as well. It's always a pleasure. Look forward to listening to your awesome stuff that you put out there every time. And have a great rest of your week, and always a pleasure. And I hope to see you soon.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about MVK, head over to coupa.com. It's COUPA.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Susan Walsh, who discusses how to normalize your product, customer, and vendor data to avoid planning and forecasting issues with your inventory. Also, the interview with Edmund Zagorin, who describes why the cost of a spend is an important metric for some of the strategic sourcing categories. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform, or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.